All right, yesterday we ranked the position groups on offense, so can you guess what we're going to talk about on today's Morning Pit? A little bit more talk show fodder again today as we rank the position groups yesterday on the offense. We flip over to the defense now. Could we have done this all in one episode? Maybe, but then I wouldn't get to talk at length about each position group and stretch it out into 2 days of podcast as opposed to one, but that's okay. This is what we do in the summer, right? Like, when there's no news happening, we need to find things to talk about. We want to find Pitt football stuff to talk about. So you tune into the Morning Pit for a little bit of Pitt football conversation. And that's what we've got now. We've talked about recruiting earlier this week, and we're ranking position groups on the team in the latter part of the week. Of course, tomorrow we'll have the mailbag, so we've got that to look forward to. We always enjoy doing those. There's still time if you want to get your questions in for the mailbag episode of the Morning Pit tomorrow. You can submit your questions on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Go to the Between Fifth and Forbes message board. We have our mailbag post there. It's like mail time. Submit your questions for the mailbag. And you can post your questions in that thread, and we'll answer as many as we can in tomorrow's mailbag. We already got some great questions rolling in, some left over from last week, so I'm looking forward to that as always. But today, we're on the defense. There's 5 position groups on defense, basically, right? Defensive end, defensive tackle, linebacker, cornerback, safety. How do they rank? 5 to 1. 5 being the worst, or at least the least of the 5, all the way up to 1 being the best. Let's count them down and rank them here on the Thursday edition of the Morning Pit. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Thursday. It's the Morning Pit. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see the website below, Panther-Lair.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting, Pitt transfers, Pitt everything. You find it at Panther-Lair.com, and message boards to talk about Pitt sports with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. We provide lots of content and coverage at Panther-Lair.com, and you provide the community and conversation on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Message boards get a bad rap, but the reality is you're a Pitt fan. You like to talk to other Pitt fans about Pitt sports. This is the best place to do it. I think it's the best online community of Pitt fans you're going to find, and you probably should be a part of it. If you're a Pitt fan, you should join up right now, Panther-Lair.com. And of course our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, where we have all of our Pitt video content Monday through Friday. You can find Pitt, our daily morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. We have our weekly live show that we did last night. Usually it's at 8:30. Sometimes we have to push it back to 8:45. That's, every now and then schedules get in the way. Sometimes my dog gets on the camera, but, this happens. In the Panther-Lair.com offices, there's a lot going on. Go on, buddy. But I think that's fun. It's a reason to watch the video. Don't just listen to the audio podcast, because if you were watching the video, you get to see my dog. So there, you've got that going for you. So here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, we have morning Pit videos. We have a live Panther-Lair show. We have a live dog, a couple of live dogs, actually. We have press conferences and post-game shows and interviews, all kinds of video content for you right here. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and that way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. All right, let's count them down. 5 positions, 5 through 1. Defensive end, defensive tackle, linebacker, cornerback, safety. How do we rank them? Somebody's got to be last. And for Pitt this year, and I'll say with a caveat that's going to apply to a bunch of these positions, and I think it applied a little bit to wide receiver yesterday, although I'm a little less bullish on that position than I am on this one, that I'm putting it number 5 for the defense. But with a lot of these positions, there's some unknowns. There's some question marks, but very much a possibility of being answered in the positive by the end of the season. And I think that's the case with the number 5 position group here on the defense. It's defensive end. Now, defensive end was a weakness last year. And maybe the year before as well, but certainly last year. And it's funny, like one of the real indicators of how poor the defensive ends played, or how little of an impact the defensive ends made, is when you look at the linebacker numbers. You had 3 linebackers with double-digit tackles for loss. Kyle Lewis and Rasheem Biles both had like 7+ sacks. That's great for those guys. They're making plays. They're putting up big stat lines and all of that. But if your linebackers, particularly your outside linebackers, are getting a bunch of tackles for loss and a bunch of sacks, what does that mean? What are you doing? Come on, pop quiz out there. What are you doing if your linebackers are getting sacks? What are you calling a lot of? Blitzes. Why do you call blitzes? Because you can't get pressure with your front 4. I'm oversimplifying here to some extent. I mean, if it was me, I'd be calling blitzes with Rasheem Biles and Kyle Lewis all the time too, because they're kind of awesome at it. But the reality is, in your dream scenario of a 4-3 defense, you're getting pressure with the front four. And when Pitt's 4-3 defensive scheme, either under Dave Wanstead or under Pat Narduzzi, and they're different schemes to be sure, but they're a 4-3 alignment, when they've been at their best, they've been getting pressure from the front four. 2019, 2020, they were getting pressure from the defensive ends. 2021, 2022, the defensive tackles were chipping in. 2021, Haba Baldonado had 9 sacks. Kalijah Cansey was awesome in those 2 years. When the defense has been at its best, they're getting pressure with the front four, and they don't have to blitz. They still can, but they don't have to. Last year's defense kind of had to. A lot. I'd be curious to know what the numbers are. I don't really have access to that kind of data, but it sure felt like they blitzed a lot more than probably more than Pat Narduzzi would be comfortable with. And the reason why is because their defensive ends, in particular, weren't getting enough pressure off the edge. And so I put that group at number 5, even though there's a significant amount of turnover there. I mean, they lost multiple transfers. Chief Borders transfers out. David Ojebwe transferred out. They lost Nate Matlack to graduation. Sincere Edwards transferred out. So, quite a bit of turnover. And of course, they brought in 3 transfers to supplement that group, to fill that group out. And if they're going to be good this year, Jimmy Scott has to build on his breakout season that he had last year when he had 6 sacks, which is a number that I think that's solid. 6 sacks, that's pretty good, except for the fact that, well, first of all, you want your top defensive end to have more than 6 sacks. Second of all, half of those sacks came in one game. Now, sometimes you're going to have clusters and things like that. Some of these guys who put up big numbers, big sack numbers or whatever it might be, are going to get a bunch in one game. That's kind of how you build stats like that, usually. But to have 3 in one game and 3 in the other 12 games, that's not very good. And, we're talking about, again, your leading defensive end only had 6 sacks. For this defense to be at its best, this defensive scheme to be at its best, the leading defensive end has to have more than 6 sacks. And that's where they were last year, which sort of illustrates the point. So they got Jimmy Scott back. He needs to take a step forward from what was a breakout season last year. And then the 3 transfers really need to step up. And this is where I think the position group could end up higher on the list at the end of the season than it is right now. And a lot of it is going to rely on Jaden Moore, the transfer from Oregon, redshirt sophomore. I think he has a chance to be really, really good. When we ranked the top 5 players on the team or top 10 players on the team or whatever it was last year, or last week or whenever I did that, I think I did it in the 3-2-1 column. I ranked the top 10 players on the team. I think Jaden Moore has a chance to break into that group by the end of the year. Small sample size during his playing time in Oregon, but what he did in that small sample size compared very favorably with some of the best edge rushers and pass rushers in the Big Ten last season. Some of the biggest names you think of in the Big Ten last year, Abdul Carter, Jack Sawyer, Mikhail Kamara, Jaden Moore's numbers were comparable to what those guys did, albeit in a smaller sample size. He needs to take what he did in a small workload and translate it to a larger workload. If he does, the defensive ends, I think, have a chance to be pretty good. And then Blaine Spires and Joey Zielinski, 2 veteran defensive ends. They've played a lot. They've got decent production in their careers, not great. They need to be your solid, rest of your rotation defensive ends. For now, that group's got to be at the bottom because there's too many question marks. Almost all these groups have question marks. They have the most. And they were, I think, the least impactful position group on the defense last year. So you have the least impactful position group on the defense last year with even more questions entering this year. You're going to have them, they're not going to be ranked very high, and we put them number 5 among the defense. At number 4, I put the cornerbacks. And here again, chance to rise the ranks. Just a lot of question marks. They return Rashad Battle and Tamon Lynham. Lynham I thought was fine last year after transferring in from Nebraska, played as a reserve, rotational guy, and he was fine. Battle, just on and off with injuries. He's been, good enough when he has played. For the most part, but he's also dealt with injuries, and I think he was even limited in the spring. So you just need the guy to be consistent, and then you have question marks kind of behind them of who you're going to rely on. Shadarian Harrison, most improved player on the defense this spring. I think he has a chance to be really, really good, but he's got to actually do it. oh, geez. How could I draw a blank? The transfer who came from Cal PA. Why? Rashawn Murray. That's it. How could I draw a blank there? He'll be in the rotation. I think Sean Lee, the freshman, will have a chance to be in the rotation. Guys like Nigel Maynard and Davion Pritchard, I think will have a chance to be in the rotation. There's just a lot of question marks. The transfer of Rylan Gandy. Gandy was just fine last year. I thought he was good enough. But he left and transferred to Indiana, and that opens it up an opportunity for guys like Harrison and Murray and Lee and Pritchard and Maynard and all these guys. But it leaves them without another experienced player. And so you have question marks. You're just not sure what you're going to get out of that group. I think they can be good. I think they should be good. I think they've got good players at corner, but there's question marks for sure. Number 3, and I went back and forth about this. I'm going to go with the defensive tackles here. I think the ceiling is really, really high for the defensive tackles. But here again, they just haven't done it yet. And guys like Francis Brew and Jasir Whittington are young. Isaiah Neal still feels like a young guy, but I mean, he's going to be in a primary featured role this year. Sean Fitzsimmons, Nick James, good players. I think there's really good players. We talked about it last year that defensive tackle had the highest percentage of former 4-star recruits of any position group on the team. And that's still the case. I mean, Nick James was a 4-star. Isaiah Neal was a 4-star. Francis Brew and Jasir Whittington, these guys were all 4-star prospects. And, they need to play like it. And Brew and Whittington, I understand they were true freshmen last year. Neal was a redshirt freshman. And, Fitzsimmons was coming off injuries and stuff. But, now you need that group to step up. And I think they've got a chance. I think this group, the ceiling's as high for the defensive tackles probably as it is for any position group on the defense. I really think that. I'm really that high on these groups, on these guys. I think Sean Fitzsimmons can be really disruptive up front. I think Isaiah Neal is an explosive player. I think Francis Brew is strong. I think Jasir Whittington is somebody that, the staff was really, really hoping to not lose this offseason, and they were able to hold on to him. And then I think Nick James seems like just like a solid guy. You know what I mean? Like a Devin Danielson, David Green, Tyler Bentley type of guy, which is okay if you've got someone really disruptive playing with him, like Fitzsimmons or Neal or Brew or Whittington, or like Danielson and Bentley and Green had like Kalijah Cansey playing next to them for a couple years there. So if you've got that disruptive guy, you can have the solid guy, and maybe you can put 2 disruptive guys out there together. I think the defensive tackles, if they play at the level I think they're capable of playing, can do a whole lot to open the game up for the defensive ends and the linebackers too. And everybody gets to eat when the defensive tackles are going off. And I think this group has a chance to do it. And so I'm putting them at 3. But again, just like with these other spots, there's a real chance for them to climb. Now, how many position groups can climb into the top 2? There's only space for 2 of them, right? And I don't know if we're going to drop either one of these 2 from the top group. And I think you can probably guess which order. You might have already known before we started which order the top 2 were going to be in. But the defensive tackles, I think the ceiling's really high. I'm interested to see this year which one of those guys emerges as the man. Because I think somebody in that defensive tackle room could have a big-time breakout season. I think a couple of guys could have breakout seasons. But I think somebody could have a big-time, like, all-conference breakout season. I'm just not sure which one. It could be Fitzsimmons, could be Neal, could be Brew, could be Whittington, could be James. I don't know. But I think there's a real chance for that group to rise above what I think the expectations probably are for them right now. Number 2, and you probably would have guessed this, and maybe you would disagree with it. Maybe we should switch these around, like 2 should swap for 3 or vice versa or something. But I put the safeties at number 2. I like Javon McIntyre a lot. Multi-year starter at safety. He's played a lot. He's played both safety positions. He's been productive. He's done a good job when he's been out there. He hasn't always made the splashier plays, but I think that comes and goes. And now, I think this will be his senior season, his redshirt senior season. I think he's going to have a chance to really kind of be the anchor and the leader of that group. And then Cruz Brookins is probably, I am as excited to see him play as I am about anybody on this team. I think Cruz Brookins is going to step into a starting role, play a ton and play really well. There's just, and I know, he gets interceptions in practice. Oh, big deal. There's something about having a nose for the ball. And we talked about this probably like last week or the week before that, if you can go out and practice, we might have talked about this with Deron Barksdale. Actually, when Deron Barksdale committed, another Steel Valley safety prospect, I think we talked about when Deron Barksdale committed. With Cruz Brookins, if you can go out and practice day after day and bring the heat like that you are getting that many takeaways in spring camp and training camp, you've got a little something extra that not everybody has. You've got an extra gear, an extra drive that not everybody else on the team and not everybody else that you're going to be facing has. And that's the kind of thing that can separate you in games. If it's true that you play how you practice, Cruz Brookins should be playing at an all-conference level this year because he's been practicing like an all-conference player the past 2 years. He was in a reserve role last year, played in that defensive sub package, that third down package as the extra DB last year. Now he's going to step into a primary starting role, and I think he's going to live up to the expectations. I really do. I think he's in line for a big season. And then behind those guys, you have Kavir Baines-Marquez, who came in as a transfer. You have Alan Bryant, who I think is going to be really good. You have Jesse Anderson, who I think is going to be really good. They have recruited the safety position really well, and I think they've got the kind of guys they like, which we would say about the number one position here too. But they've got the kind of guys they like who fit the defense. And I think they're going to be really good. And, of course, that brings us to number one, and it's the linebackers. How could it not be? You've got a returning All-American. You have two guys who were in the top 4 in tackles last season, top 2 in tackles for loss last season, top 3 or so in sacks. They had interceptions. Kyle Lewis and Rasheem Biles were great last year. And I think they're only going to get better. I think there's room for them to get better, and I think they're going to get better. Both of those guys should be all-conference selections. I don't know if they'll both be first-team all-conference. They might cancel each other out and kind of get ripped off a little bit and end up on the second team. But they should both, I think they're both capable of playing at first-team all-conference levels, and I think Kyle Lewis, I don't see any reason he takes a step back from last season. The only thing that might take a step back for Lewis and Biles is what I talked about as the defensive end step up. Those guys might not need to blitz as much, and so they might end up with fewer tackles for loss or fewer sacks. But I think they are going to be really good on the outside. I think Braylon Lovelace is ready for the starting middle linebacker job. And while there's not a lot of experience in the depth, the staff is really high on Jeremiah Marcelin and Cam Lindsey. And those two guys, plus Jaden Bonsu, the transfer who came in from Ohio State, should be able to fill in behind Lovelace, Biles, and Lewis really well. I think that position group has really come into its own. I think they came into their own last year, and I think it's just going to be a step forward for them this year as the top position group, not just on the defense, but on the team. I'm not sure there's a group that's better. We talked yesterday about those 3 elements, right? Returning production, depth, and just overall talent level. They're a little questionable on the depth side just due to the experience factor with, the guys behind Lewis, Lovelace, and Biles not having played all that much. But in terms of returning production, they've got a ton of it. And in terms of overall talent, I think they've got a ton of it too. Linebackers should be really good this year. I think it's the strength of the team, the strength of the defense. It's the number one position group on the defense. And like I said, probably on the team too. All right, what's your ranking? You agree with me? You disagree with me? I know there's probably going to be a little bit of both. We got some disagreement yesterday on a few groups, and that's why we do these kind of rankings, right? To have those conversations, those back and forth discussions. So post it here in the comments on YouTube or on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. While you're on the message boards, make sure you look for the mailbag thread so you can post your question for this week's mailbag, which we'll have out tomorrow right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So thanks for tuning in today. Appreciate it. Hope you've had a great week so far. Enjoyed the videos and everything. Hope you have a great Thursday, and we will catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit, the Friday edition, the mailbag edition, right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.